All right, I'm really excited that you're all here. So I'm going to talk about credible information and the infodemic. I know a lot of you being members of this community, the EcoWell, already are, scientists yourselves, or at least really well informed. So that's great. Some of you may not be maybe new to this channel, so I'll kind of have a little bit of basic information and also some more in-depth information for those of you who have been working in the health sector for a while or have been interested in it. So I'm just going to talk about Cochrane and evidence synthesis. Then Cochrane US, there's 89 different country Cochrane offices. The US is the largest by far. Then the infodemic and how everyone can get involved in Cochrane. So Cochrane is for anyone interested in using high quality information to make health decisions. So practitioners, patients, carers, researchers, funders, policymakers. Cochrane Evidence provides a powerful tool to enhance healthcare knowledge and decision making. So Cochrane is a membership as well. It's free. And we have over 13,000 members, which are likely authors, systematic reviewers, researchers, and 82,000 supporters from 130 countries. So a supporter may participate in challenges, may participate in all of the different things we have going on. You get points, you can unlock trainings, you can help with translations. There's all kinds of things that you can do. So I have a poll here, but I know we can't really actually do it. So I'll just pretend we are. So, or maybe you can write in the chat if you think you know, or maybe Jen, you can see how much you know about Cochrane. So what doesn't Cochrane do? Systematic reviews, develop guidelines, knowledge translation, which is like getting the knowledge to who it needs to be to, working with student groups, dissemination of evidence, and YouTube videos. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so the only thing we don't do, yeah, yep, we don't develop guidelines. So we give the evidence to anyone who needs it, hopefully to the people who need it most, policymakers and hospital systems and practitioners. And they use our objective science to come up with their guidelines. So Cochrane isn't ever going to tell someone what to do. We're going to give you the evidence, and then hopefully it turns into good policy and good practice. So what is a systematic review? Sometimes this term is thrown around, and even before I started working at Cochrane, I had used systematic reviews in my work at the Centers for Disease Control and UNICEF. However, I hadn't actually carried out a systematic review. So like I said, it takes all available primary evidence, RCTs, observational studies, around a very specific, well-defined topic, and it synthesizes all of those studies, all of that evidence, to produce new high-quality evidence to be used by all the populations I've already mentioned. So Cochrane holds really high standards for review authors. You must follow rigorous and systematic methods in order to be published on the Cochrane Library. There is no fee paid to any Cochrane authors, and authors do not pay anything to Cochrane. So it remains objective and non-partial. There's no exchange of payment. This is just, I know it looks crazy, but this is a forest plot, the middle, and this is what the cumulative meta-analysis, this is what a systematic review ends in. And it's pretty technical, but I really like this example because it explains well how a systematic review works and why it's important. So here you can see that in 1960, there was one RCT on this thrombolytic therapy. So this is a therapy for heart issues. It only had 23 patients in this study, and the odds ratio, the confidence interval, was extremely large. So it crossed the null. This means that the findings were very non-specific, couldn't really conclude anything. By 1970, now we're getting into 7 studies, 2,000 patients, and you can see that the confidence interval is getting much smaller, and we're approaching a p of less than 0.01, which is what you need to show significance in a study with data. So now we're getting on to the late 70s. Now we have 5,000 patients, and you can see by all of these studies in a row, the confidence interval is small. It doesn't cross the null, the one, it's less, the p-value is less than 0.01. But if you look over here in textbook and review recommendations, it's not, this thrombolic therapy is not routinely, it's not routinely used. It's not used even specifically. It's not really even ever used. It's not even used experimentally, and it's not mentioned really anywhere. So even though all of these studies, which included 5,000 randomized patients, so half of these patients did receive the therapy, half didn't, because no one's really keeping track of all of these studies and putting it into textbooks and sending it to hospital systems and giving it to policymakers, it doesn't become routinely used until the late 80s, when there are 47,000 patients that had been randomized, and the confidence interval is extremely small. The p-value is extremely low. So it took more than 10 years to become a routine therapy, with researchers using their money to do these trials, researchers randomizing people to a placebo and to this therapy when the placebo group should have been already receiving the therapy. So it's a waste of money. It's research waste, which is kind of a buzzword these days. And it's dangerous for all of these patients that were randomized to a placebo when they could have been receiving this really, really well-known and very effective treatment. So what a systematic review does is keep track of all of this. So before 10 years have gone by and something's really well known, Cochrane can say, hey, there's been 10 studies on this. It does or doesn't work. We need to research something else. So those systematic reviews are published on the Cochrane Database for Systematic Reviews. This is a journal. It's published by Wiley. There's 12 issues per year. And it's part of the Cochrane Library. So the Cochrane Database for Systematic Reviews is like other journals. You either have to have a subscription or like through a university or something like that to have access to the full text reviews. However, on the Cochrane Library, there's a lot of accompanying information for each review, so you wouldn't necessarily have to access the full text through the Cochrane database if you didn't need the full text. It's a very high impact factor journal. It's ranked 10 out of 165 journals in general medicine. And like I said, it also includes plain language summaries, author information, abstracts, YouTube videos with authors, etc. So this is an example of who uses systematic reviews, and specifically Cochrane systematic reviews. WHO is one of the biggest users and procurers of Cochrane reviews. So 80% of WHO guidelines are based on Cochrane systematic reviews. So, and that's been going up every year. And just this past year with COVID and everything else, there have been many, many systematic reviews commissioned by WHO to help with guidelines and policy around COVID. So in the US, we have, we're called the US Network, the Cochrane US Network. We have 23 member centers, and this is just kind of, this is a list of all of them. I know it's a busy slide, but we have review groups on the left here that study specific topics. So they may be all over the US, but they're all part of this review group, and they study neonatal, urology, fertility regulation. We also have an associate center, which is a conglomerate of these West Coast groups that work together for training, for dissemination, for putting systematic reviewing into curriculums in universities, for getting it into this Kaiser Permanente health systems. And then we have these 15 affiliate centers. Some are professional societies, some are universities, some are health organizations. So we have MD Anderson, we have the Mayo Clinic, we have the American College of Physicians, Tufts University, Cornell University. So it's really an amazing group of multidisciplinary experts across many fields who have contacts all over the US and globally. And then we also can connect to all the other Cochrane centers in the world. So it's really this huge reach of multidisciplinary experts at every level. So some of the benefits of having Cochrane networks in countries is that you have a highly reputable entity of multidisciplinary health experts with one voice. Because we're not based in the US, we're based in the UK. We can be a non-political voice, which has really been important these past 18 months to help influence US policy and guidelines. So we can look, nonpartisan. It's accessible, it's affordable, it's usually free, it's trustworthy, and there's opportunities to engage in all kinds of Cochrane things, from students to experts. So we want everyone at large interested in health information to have a better understanding of how Cochrane Science works, how they can access our products. And then it also helps us identify knowledge gaps so that we can set up subsequent research and develop products as needed for the US. And as I mentioned, we liaise with the global Cochrane community. So here's some ways that we facilitate evidence production and dissemination. We have webinar series, systematic review trainings, case studies, repositories, webinar series. You are here. We have a mentoring program. We have a librarian information specialist listserv. We work with guideline development workshops and guideline developers and policymakers. So this is an example of some of the different kinds of things we do to reach our different audiences. A little bit more specifically, I just wanted to highlight a couple of projects that we currently have going on. One is a visual data series, which is making reliable evidence easy to use. And a second is a new mentoring program that we have within Cochrane US, and we're building capacity for global knowledge brokers. So the visual data series is with Emory University, and med students in the School of Medicine at Emory University are alerted when one of our high-profile Cochrane reviews comes out, thank COVID, and they create an accurate, easier to read visual abstract, which are published on our library, so not behind a paywall, and they're published with a plain language summary and a news item. And these med students receive points to Cochrane. They're acknowledged on the website, and they're kind of like, they're not necessarily published in the Cochrane database, but they're published on the Cochrane library. And there's the website if you wanted to look at more of them, but here's one example. So this one is hydroxychloroquine and COVID-19. We all remember that fun. So they have, this is the title. This is, who did it, the credit. This is the kind of like the little summary. The evidence assessed. What did they do? What were their methods? There were 14 total studies included. They graded the evidence. Some of it was moderate certainty, some of it was high, some of it was low. They have the results here, 1, 2, 3, the limitations of their studies, and then the final conclusion. Hydroxychloroquine does not reduce deaths. And here you can see, with the red circle, that it's very well cited. It has all of the information, how to get in touch with the school, with the authors, where to find the publication, etc. So this is one thing that's really important when you're looking for credible information, is it has the date. Does it have all of these things to make it credible? The second highlight I wanted to talk about was our mentoring program, which anyone is able to get involved in. This is our pilot year. So it actually started as a Twitter contest that anyone who was interested in pursuing health science as a career path or through their university studies, or is already working in health science or medicine and are curious about evidence synthesis, and come from historically underserved or marginalized population groups, because Cochrane has a goal of inclusivity and racial justice. So we got almost 300 applicants, and we were only able to take 9. So we were really excited to get so many people interested in our program. And these were the 9 selected mentors. And we have 2 different groups. Cohort 1 is 3 they're already young professionals working in medicine and public health. They each have an individual mentor who is from the Cochrane US network. One is a professor from Tufts, one is a professor from University of Colorado, and one is a professor from University of Pennsylvania. And then the other 6 are in cohort 2. They're all located in South America. It's a Spanish-speaking group, and that one is group mentoring. So I am the mentor, and we have a coordinator who helps from Cochrane. and we meet monthly. We have speakers, we do projects, we get involved with some of the events that are going on in Cochrane. They help each other. We have organized events, so that's more of like a group mentoring program, and it's all going really well. It's been really fun. So as I mentioned, our resources are for everyone. So a full systematic review, full text, you have to know what you're reading. You have to kind of have experience with studies and research to read a full systematic review. However, we have so many products that are available based on these systematic reviews that we want everyone to be able to access it. So in the US, we inform guidance. So this is one of our affiliates, Cornell University. They are conducting a living systematic review, which means that every time a new study comes out on the topic, they include it into the systematic review. So someone's always keeping an eye out for new studies and including it. And in that way, their recommendations may change over time, given the breadth of evidence that is continuing to come out. So this one was on breastfeeding and COVID. WHO commissioned this with our Cornell group, who is Global Nutrition Group, on is it safe to continue breastfeeding if a mother has COVID? Super important topic. And because of the work that our group did in the US network, they did come out with a scientific brief and guidance, and you can find that on WHO, that it is indeed safe. A mother should wear a mask, but should not stop breastfeeding. We have plain language summaries. So every single review that is published on the Cochrane Database has a plain language summary that accompanies it. And these are available for free. They have a search box. You can put in here like hypertension or breastfeeding or depression, and you'll come up with all of the different studies related to that topic, and there'll all be a plain language summary. This is often the only version that many of our users see because it's easier to access, easier to understand, they're free, and they're searchable. So check that out on the Cochrane.org website. We also have many, many translations, over 30,000 translations now in 15 languages. And there's a lot of podcasts. They're usually with authors or experts in a certain topic area, short 5 to 10 minutes. And these are also available in 11 languages. As we all know, English is not the first language of most people across the globe. So in an effort to make it accessible, we have a large translation team, and also people can get involved in translation. So if you speak a language that is other than English, potentially not as common as some of the major 6, you would be an asset to Cochrane by participating in translations. This is called a decision aid, so also a visual data graphic. This helps support decision making, easier to understand. This is one is about heavy menstrual bleeding and what are the options. So here, these are all free too. Anything that's not the full text is free. So here I just wanted to point out again how we know when something is reliable. So anything that we're looking at for health information, we should see, okay, where can I see the source of this? And here we have read the full review at thecochranelibrary.com. Who wrote this? Who is this credited to? Down here we have a contact with contact information, a full name. Here we have who created this. Oh, this comes out of Cochrane Gynecology and Fertility. And over here on the right-hand side, we have the full citation, the full published citation, if you want to find it, in the Cochrane Database of Systematic Reviews. So these are all really important things to look for when you're looking for if a source is reliable or credible. This is an example of someone from RTI and University of North Carolina. She's part of the US network. She had a really high-profile review come out for screening for COVID, and she did a 5-minute YouTube interview talking about why it's important and what it means and what to look for. So super accessible, a quick 5 minutes, and you get to see the author themselves explaining what they did. There's many, many trainings available. Now, some of these are behind a paywall, and many of them are free. If you participate in some of the Cochrane activities, you get credits towards some of these paywall trainings. So These are for all different kinds of audiences. This Cochrane Evidence Essentials is a great one. It's just for, I don't like using the term the lay public, but it's for the general population, people who have health conditions themselves, people who are caring for someone, people who are studying health information, anyone. And that's a really great free module to learn, like, what is evidence and what am I supposed to do with it and how do I recognize it and where do I go to find it? We also have one on knowledge translation, and knowledge translation means like getting the knowledge that Cochrane is producing and translating it into something usable for all kinds of different populations. So that's really great too, because this group, having some knowledge in health science, you guys are knowledge translators and you guys are taking information and technical evidence and you're translating it on your websites, on Discord, on your podcasts. So you guys are knowledge translators and knowledge brokers. So this would be an interesting one potentially for this group to watch, on what is the best way and how do I reach the people that want to hear this and in different formats. So you all may be interested in that. That one's also free. So some of our target audiences, we have a lot, hence all the different types of products that we produce. Media and journalists, we all have seen how incredibly important it is for media and journalists to get credible, reliable, up-to-date information. Guidelines and recommendation developers, so this is often like in hospital systems, public health communities, like recommendation, wear a mask, where did they get the science for that? Healthcare providers, hospital systems, health policy makers, priority populations, researchers and educators, patients, consumer advocacy groups, community groups, and you. And you may fall in one of these target audiences already or not. And if not, I would love to hear what your audience is and how Cochrane could support what you do. So let's go on to talk about the infodemic. I imagine many of you have heard, maybe some of you haven't, about what the infodemic is. It's a hot kind of buzzword right now. So I think it's kind of gotten into the realm of infodemic itself as part of the infodemic because people hear all kinds of different things about what the infodemic actually is and what it means. So these are some graphics that I really like that I looked up different groups. So the World Health Organization just has this poor man, he's being inundated with information from all sources, from TV, the radio, cell phones, from newspapers, etc. I like this one from the United Nations as well because it's really clear. Try to stop the spread of false information. It's very inclusive. It's mostly showing people on their phones because that's how a lot of the information is spreading these days. The NCA has this big avalanche of information that's about to take the sky over. The International Science Council, similar. Like here's the response, and then it goes into this information system, and then it comes out, and what starts here may be very different from what comes out here. And this is two people reading. So she's reading blue, but he's understanding what she's reading. He's reading orange, but she's getting something different from it. So just how people may be looking at the same thing and understanding something completely different. So the infodemic definition is too much information, including false or misleading information, in digital and physical environments during a disease outbreak. This term was coined in 2006, but wasn't widely used until WHO declared the infodemic alongside the COVID pandemic. It causes confusion and risk-taking behaviors that can harm the health of individuals and their families and their communities. It leads to mistrust in health authorities and undermines public health response. We have all witnessed this in many forms and variations. And it can and has been intensifying and lengthening the outbreaks because people are unsure how to protect their health. They're unsure where to look. They're unsure what to do, who to believe, and that just prolongs things. And we're all living all of this right now. So WHO called for the global health community to sign on to a call for action to manage the infodemic. Cochrane was one of the first responders because as a nonpartisan and autonomous group, we strive to use our voice for this kind of thing, and especially in the US where it's so political and so bipartisan, we wanted to sign on right away and, just say we're here, we're credible, we're nonpartisan. So to manage an infodemic, there's a lot of things you can do. It's basically enabling good health practices from the individual level all the way through policymakers and everything in between. So making science more accessible, transparent, understandable, maintaining trusted sources of information. This is a big one. And this is often a point of contention as well because people may fully trust somebody. It may be their parent, it may be their church leader, it may be their next door neighbor who is a lawyer and who they inherently trust. But that doesn't mean that that person can be a trusted source of health information. So it's very difficult to go tell people you're not looking at trusted sources of information if they do trust that source. However, it's not a health science information source. So it's that's why we want to be transparent and be really clear about what we're saying. So we want to promote evidence informed policies. We want to listen to community concerns and questions because if we don't, we're not helping in any way by getting information in a way people need it and want it. We want to encourage people to understand the risks that they're taking if they're not following guidelines and policies that are coming out of the science. Build resilience to misinformation, which is how to identify information, what to look for, how to know if information is credible, where to get your information. And the point is to engage and empower communities to take positive action and really to leverage the collective knowledge and support of our communities. So let's talk a little bit about what makes cyber information credible. So everyone's getting their information through various cyber platforms these days, including television, sometimes a newspaper, but even still, that would fall under this. So what to look for? Is there a title? Does it have a specific title? And is it an objective title? Or is it like study shows just what we thought, we knew that this was not going to work out, or click here to find out why you should never, blah, blah, blah. Or so those are kind of signs that it's probably not going to be objective fact stating information. It's going to be someone's opinion on information. It's going to be something to get you to click on someone's website so that you look at more of their information or buy what they're selling. So just a title like information and options for heavy menstrual bleeding. Is it exciting? Nope. Is it factual? Probably, because, it's just stating the title. Does it have clear citations? Is it clear where the information was originally published if it's not where you're reading it? So if you're on a Johns Hopkins University website, which is a great one, Mayo Clinic, Harvard, Cochrane, it's probably likely to be information that was published from that institution. And if not, it will be very clearly cited. But when you get into some of the other health websites, news sites, opinion sites, blogs, if it's not clearly credited or you can click on where the original information is, I would be really wary of it. There should be a citation for the published research, a link to where the research was originally done or where the information originally came from. Like I mentioned, Johns Hopkins, Mayo are always great places to look, or another reliable location that can be accessed really quickly. So you shouldn't have to click through 5 different places. Oh, it says this was Johns Hopkins, and then you get to Johns Hopkins and it was a different researcher, and you get to that different researcher and they're part of whoever. So it should be something that where with one click, oh, okay, here's the original information. Does it give credit to the authors? The original authors should be clearly credited. Often what we get is secondary, tertiary information, which is reported by a second, third, fourth source, and it's not clear who wrote it, or credit isn't given to the original publishers. Date. This is really important. We've all seen something come along that seems like it makes a lot of sense in our current daily context, but when you look at when it was published, it's 2014, so it cannot possibly be related to COVID or something. So this is happening a lot, that it's like, oh, look, this just came, that it doesn't even say this just came out, but you assume it just came out because it's front page news on a blog or on a website, or someone sends it to you in a text, hey, look at this information I saw, and you assume that it's new information, but a lot of times it's not. So just, and if it's not new information, that doesn't mean it's not credible. It just may mean it's taken out of context. And does it make sense? Sometimes you read things and it just doesn't make sense. So, when there were all the George Floyd protests and everything last summer, I went with my children to a social justice protest here in Los Angeles, and all of these people were texting, people that I know, people who are incredibly smart, intelligent people. They have good jobs, they're parents, they're grown adults, but sending all these texts saying, oh, they are going to bus in 800 people who are going to riot at this protest. It's going to be super dangerous. And I thought, who's busing the people in? Who's paying for the buses? They said they're all taking over all of the hotels in town. I thought, who's paying for all of this? Why would 800 people want to come here to riot? Who are they? It just made no sense to me. And it was totally false. So a lot of times, like, listen to your gut. If it doesn't seem like it makes sense, it's probably not true, or very partially true. So this is a graphic. We did a contest in October for World Evidence-Based Health Day, and we did a graphic contest. This was one of the winners, Nikki Shaw. So I like this. So science is helping this investigator reach the facts without getting stuck in all the misinformation below it. So this is the same, very similar. So text and WhatsApp, especially globally, has been a huge source of misinformation in the US as well. But in a lot of countries, internet access isn't as prolific as text messages and WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. So people are just getting messages sent and sent and sent. So on some platforms, you can see how many times it's been forwarded. WhatsApp shows now in a message, it will say forwarded many times, or you'll see multiple arrows in the top of the message. I would doubt any information that comes like that, or definitely look it up and see if it's true before you pass it on. It often doesn't refer to where the information came from. There's not much information that can be put into a text message or into an SMS. It often contains a lot of use of they. Oh, they, blah, blah, blah. They are saying, they said, they're going to do. But who's they? If it's not obvious who they is, it's probably also a misconstruing of information. Or people verify it through chains of, well, my neighbor, it's her cousin, and she talked to him and he said, but when you go back and ask, they're like, oh, no, it was my cousin, but my cousin was the one who sent me the message, but who knows where the message came from. Does it make sense? And does it include a directive or action? Because a lot of those are kind of scammy as well. So sign here, click here to be part of the movement. Oh, don't go to this place, or do something right now. So there's not really anything you have to do right now. So take your time, go back, look for the truth in the evidence. So one thing that's happening a lot, and this has always happened, but it's really come to light now and has been a point of contention, is what if there's not enough evidence? Because this happens a lot. This was just a study that I would use before COVID to show. So this is a systematic review. The authors were looking for, if you tax the fat content of food, is it going to help prevent obesity and other health outcomes? However, they only found 2 studies. So only 2 studies ever were conducted on this topic. They both looked at a small number of foods. And as a result, after the systematic review was done, the authors were not confident in the results because Evidence was only from 2 studies. They were really small studies. One did not report accurate statistics. The results were from observational studies, which are not as comparable as randomized control trials. So, as a conclusion, they said we did not find enough reliable evidence to say whether attacks on fat content would help or not. More research is needed. Well, people don't like to see this. People want a response, people want evidence. So that is something that the global evidence community is really struggling with and really, really focusing on right now. So we need to respond with scientific rigor, but in a timely fashion that meets the needs of our users. If credible groups don't say something, other groups are going to fill in the void. That may not be experts, they may just be whoever. So we need to provide evidence, even when we're faced with not enough evidence. So that's where the transparency comes in. We need to be a trusted source and say, here is what all of the evidence shows today. The evidence is going to change because studies are continuing every single day. But the best evidence today says blah, blah, blah. And this is where we really need to leverage partnerships and marshal all of our collective resources in an optimal way and make sure that we're seeing it through an equity lens. So is everyone receiving the information that they need in a way that they can use it? So Cochrane has been a huge responder to COVID. And if you go to the Cochrane Library, you'll find everything to do with COVID. There's just a lot of stuff, a lot of it easy to use and see. It's all free, even full text reviews. Anything related to COVID right now is free on the Cochrane Library. Another response that Cochrane did, we convened a large virtual event, which was hosted by Cochrane with WHO and COVID-N, which is a large consortium of COVID researchers. We invited a lot of thought leaders, multidisciplinary thought leaders, and evidence producers and users from across the globe. We got together and reflected on the pandemic and the infodemic so that we can prepare and respond to future global health emergencies. It was a multi-day event. It was very comprehensive. Some of it was invitation only. Some of it was open to the public. We are producing an action plan to kind of call the global community to action, advocate for change that's needed in the evidence community so that we can respond more quickly and more responsibly in health emergencies, which unfortunately this won't be the last one. These are some of the topics that were discussed: helping people find and use evidence, engaging with decision makers. So those are the most relevant to the infodemic. Some of the others were on producing and prioritizing. And Dr. Tedros gave the opening introduction to Cochrane Convenes, which was really exciting. Since WHO is a user of Cochrane, it was really telling that Dr. Tedros would take time out of his extraordinarily busy days to come say hello and introduce our events. And I like that I was able to make it look like I was just in a meeting with him, and I was really proud of myself for making this little graphic. That's me looking lovingly at Dr. Tedros. All of this is available online, all of the recordings. Really, really interesting if anyone wants to check out what thought leaders said about the pandemic. There was, on October 20th, was Evidence-Based Healthcare Day. So there's been a number of world and global initiatives that have been going on trying to champion evidence-based healthcare. This was an entire week of events. Everything was free, webinars, chats. It's all available at worldebhcday.org. Cochrane was one of the major contributors and co-collaborators. And we did a number of things. We had a full panel in Spanish one day. We collaborated with Lifeology, which is a science communication organization, to create a free infodemic course that is available on Lifeology's website. And again, here's a lot of the products. I'm going to start wrapping up here. I know it's been just like a complete avalanche of information. I don't want to contribute to the infodemic. So here's a kind of a wrap up of all of the ways you can use Cochrane evidence, the ways that you can get experience with evidence or get involved in Cochrane. We have the trainings, we have the podcasts, the webinars, we have journal clubs open for anyone to join. Cochrane Crowd is for students or young professionals. It's a challenge every month where it's free, you get a training, and then you participate in some systematic reviews or evidence review or data extraction. We have Classmate, which is a group of university students across the globe who are interested in health science. We have Task Exchange, where groups that are doing systematic reviews may say, we need help with data extraction. We would like this translated into Chinese. We are looking for a consumer who can read this and see if it makes sense to patients. So those are all, some of them are paid, some of them you get authorship or you get Cochrane points, but those are open to anyone as well. You can go browse all the different tasks that are available. We have newsletters, blogs. So I encourage all of you to at least check out how to get involved with Cochrane, something, share your skills, enhance your skills. There was a Dissemination Essentials course that was free and open to anyone to join. It was a 12-month long course. I'm happy to share any of your information on our Twitter, on our social media, on our newsletter, if you have something that you'd like to share with the Cochrane community. The library has an app, so if you just want to check your phone, you can get the Cochrane Library as a free app. And we call our Cochrane Crowd group Citizen Scientists, so we would love to have you join us. So this is another little poll. What is not a Cochrane product? I know I flew through a lot of this. But some of these seem like they wouldn't be. Some of them seem like they would be. We talked about the app, the visual data, the webinars. We have the journal, the blogs, comic strips, journal club, podcasts, mugs, and t-shirts. So the only thing we don't have on this list right now is comic strips. We do have mugs and t-shirts, so feel free to buy some. And if you want to produce a cool comic strip that would look good on our website and has to do with health science and evidence, please do. We'd be happy to publish it. So that's it. Thank you so much for your attention and your time. Feel free to contact me here anytime at my email, tduque@cochrane.org. Check out our website. Please follow us on Twitter. And I would love to answer any questions about any of it, the information or how to get involved or any question at all. I'm happy to discuss, or feel free to contact me individually. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Tiffany for agreeing to participate in this webinar. For anyone who is in the audience, if you have any questions, now's your chance. So I'm not going to unmute you just because it might get a little noisy, but if you have questions, then ask it in the webinar text channel. I said text twice, and then I will ask it here. So the first question was from Capricornium Skin Tony, who asks, what's the best way for people to start understanding scientific research?
That's a great question. Scientific research can be so complex. It's presented in so many different ways. So I think if you're very new to scientific research, instead of going to a journal, JAMA or the BMJ or the Cochrane Database of Systematic Reviews, go to a site like Cochrane where you can read a plain language summary. So a plain language summary is written in the same format as a full study. So you'll have title, introduction, background, methods, results, conclusions. However, each thing is just a small paragraph, but it will start your brain recognizing, okay, this is how a scientific publication is written, and this is what I should look for in other publications of science. Do they have methods? Do they state the results? Do they list the authors? So I think if you go to Cochrane Library and you look for the plain language summaries, that would be a great place to start. And you like listening to podcasts from authors, going to universities who do a lot of research like Johns Hopkins and the University of Minnesota and Mayo Clinic, where they're very research focused, but they will give summaries of their research that are very understandable without having to know how to calculate a p-value, or do statistical analysis. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think that was a great answer. If anyone else has other questions, ask it in the webinar text channel or ask it to me directly. Now, maybe I'll ask you a question from my own experience doing SciComm, where I feel like I tried to present things as like a body of evidence, the way hopefully other people should do. But then there's always the people that come back that say, "Oh, but this one study said this,"
Yeah.
or there's physicians or other scientists that maybe haven't. I don't know. There's a disconnect with them where they cherry pick science studies and that's
Yes.
what they put out there, and then the general public sees that. A common response when I'm putting stuff out there where I'm trying to give, like, this is what the body of evidence says, then they're like, you're just ignoring this one study that's like an outlier kind of study. So
Right.
do you have any suggestions for science communicators in responding to this, and also in how they communicate science, so maybe this is not so
Yes.
burdensome to the communicator?
I know. And you just plainly stated the crux of the infodemic. There's just so much information. And people do hear something from their physician, and do they trust their physician? Of course. So, that's why it's so important that this evidence synthesis is more recognized, and that instead of this physician reading his own studies and coming to his own conclusions, he works for a health system that has taken the entire body of evidence, synthesized it, and said, no, as a health system, Kaiser, whatever, a hospital system, this is what we're going to do in that instance, so that it's not really left up to every different person's interpretation. And you're right that many people cherry pick. People want information that fits their narrative. So they've kind of already decided what they want to believe, or what, their view of the situation. And so if what you say doesn't really fit, they'll go find something that does. There's not often a lot you can do, I have found, to change people's opinions, unless they're coming to ask you, like, open-mindedly, like, oh, hey, I was wondering why the study wasn't included. And then you could say, it wasn't well done, the sample size was too small, their methods weren't replicable, their statistics weren't stated, or their statistics weren't applicable. Whatever reason, if they're asking you because they really want to know why you didn't include it, that's one thing. Otherwise, I think, don't overburden yourself with trying to respond to everyone, because they don't all want to hear the explanation. They want to just kind of contribute to their own narrative. So just keep sending people back to the good sites. Keep telling people, oh, I'm using the body of evidence. Oh, check Cochrane. Oh, check Mayo Clinic, and just kind of stay the course so that your information is consistent.
Now we got another question from Dermatology Demystified, who asks, I was thinking loads of Cochrane reviews, for example, best acne topicals, are inclusive due to the poor quality of the initial studies. It's a frustrating issue for us clinicians. What do you think we should do as a profession to address this? She goes on to say the studies are often not very comparable.
I know. That's a big problem. And you may be interested to know that part of the US network is Cochrane Skin. So we have a lot of dermatologists as part of the Cochrane US network, and I'm happy to put you in touch with them as well if you wanted to email me, and I can send your question directly to the actual dermatology Cochrane experts. But I will say that that's one thing that Cochrane has been criticized for in the past. A, that it takes way too long to do a systematic review. And B, that a lot of times after an 18-month process of reviewing all of these studies, the outcome is there's not enough evidence. And that's a letdown to everyone. Of course, everyone wants there to be enough evidence. So Cochrane is under a big reorganization right now. The pandemic, pulled the rug out from everyone, including Cochrane. So we can't take 12 to 18 months to come up with a response when, can you imagine if it took 18 months for our first information on COVID to come out? It would just be right now. That would be ridiculous. So we're starting new rapid review processes. We're starting to use preprints so that as information comes out, it may be able to be included in these reviews before it's fully published. And then also we have as one of our new directives, you may have seen in one of my slides, is how do we maintain our rigor but respond with more useful information. So we're kind of in that process right now. And that's why we would love people like yourself, a clinician, informed, a health professional, to somehow get involved in Cochrane in any of the ways available so that we can hear from you and that you can say, hey, I want to use your information, but for this reason and this reason, it's not working for me or for my patients. So, that's really useful to us. And that is helping shape the evidence synthesis community. I know that's not a great answer, but that's the answer I have for you today.
And now the level of misinformation on the internet as of late especially feels overwhelming. So for the average person, what can the average person do to contribute to correcting some misinformation or more correct information just being out there? Do you have any suggestions? And maybe also, do you have any suggestions for, there are a lot of people who even are here today who've made it a career to do SciComm. So any specific recommendations to those people who are doing science communication? So the general public, but then also people who are doing SciComm.
The knowledge translators, the knowledge brokers. Yes, I hear you and I feel you and I live this every day. I work in health just like you guys do. So I leave my Cochrane at home desk and I go out to my husband who's like, oh, I read this thing on whatever today. So blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but you live with me. I've been doing this for 20 years. Like, don't tell me that you read something on a non-credible website. So we all are going to deal with this. And no matter how many times people here go to a credible source, that's it's not always easy to do. It takes time. People just want answers. We're in this like, give me an answer right now type of society. So I have like 4 sites that I'm like, you know what, where are you getting your information? You never need to go anywhere else besides Cochrane, Mayo, Johns Hopkins, Harvard. Like you should be able to find everything you need on one of those websites. So I just kind of keep repeating every time my mom is like, hey, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, did you check one of these? Just go to the same place over and over and over and keep your story the same so that you are a consistent message and you are going to start being the consistent message for them. So you'll get your information from a consistent place and they will recognize, oh, you know what? Every time I ask Tiffany, she has something that seems really reasonable to say. And another thing is in communicating, and I know that we're often communicating non-verbally through graphics and chat rooms, but I do find that it's A, extremely difficult, but B, very important to always have, just an objective voice. So, oh, I understand, even if you want to be like, oh my God, seriously, it's like, okay, oh, I can understand where your concern might be, even if you're like, I don't understand at all. You have to be open, because if we don't have this if we're not meeting people where they are, they're just gonna block the communication. So as artists and scientists and knowledge brokers, we have to meet people where they are, but stay true to, our own science. And I think we're all just kind of learning this together too, because this is such a crazy time. So you guys are also informing us, and that's why we're having partnerships with like Lifology and the EcoWell, and that's why we're coming here, because we want to hear from you as much as you want to hear from us.
And maybe I'll just ask, like, ask one more
Yeah,
question because a lot of
yeah,
us
please
are
do.
online and
Yeah, no,
a,
please go ahead.
yeah, a really big challenge, especially when you're on like Facebook, is the algorithm and what it prefers.
Yes.
What rises to the top is like negative, polarized content.
Well, and it's
And
just what you've looked at before. So you're only seeing, your bubble.
yeah, so how can commerce, because for the information to get out there, you have to
Use
have
these
a
platforms.
growing you have to use the
Yeah,
platform,
right.
use what's working on the platform. So do you have any suggestions in light of social media algorithms for
This
social
is a great
media
question.
content creators?
Yeah, I don't know if any of you guys follow Cochrane on social media. I hope you do after today. But 2 weeks ago, maybe not even, we were blocked on Instagram. Like the entire Cochrane global account was blocked, and it showed up saying, this account has been blocked due to too many reports of misinformation
Oof.
regarding the vaccine. Well, all the only information that Cochrane puts out, we don't even say get a vaccine. We say here's the science about a vaccine, and then someone else says get a vaccine. But because so many people complained or reported Cochrane because they didn't like that we were, I don't know what they didn't like. They didn't like that we have credible vaccine information, or we're saying that we were an unreliable or fictitious source. Instagram blocked us. And it took like 3 days to get it all sorted out. So, we struggle with that as well. And I think, and then when that happened, we put it on all of our other platforms and said, hey guys, look what happened. This, we literally just had a a global conference on how to avoid the infodemic, and then we were blocked. So, I don't know. I think you have to just, it's kind of like anything. You have to build up your audience, you have to gain people's trust, and you have to be consistent. And over time, it just takes time, and we don't have time, and we don't want things to take time, but it does. So I think it's just kind of like we all have to build these blocks of trust and community engagement and consistency in the hopes that over time people will continue to look at us, so we'll show up in their algorithm and they'll be like, oh yeah, that one keeps showing up and it seems to be applicable for me. But yeah, it's super tough, and we are not a communications company, but we've had to kind of become one. So you guys might have better suggestions than I do.
It's hard.
Sorry.
Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for agreeing to collaborate for this webinar. So I am hitting the stop recording button